Hey guys, welcome to this week's virtual lecture. Last time we talked in class, we were talking about the Earth's systems, and we were talking about constructive and destructive forces and how they create landforms on our planet. In this virtual lecture, we're going to talk a little bit more about landforms, specific types of landforms that we would see throughout the world, and we'll talk a little bit about how they're formed. And then after this video lecture, you guys will have to do a quick, call it a mini project on, I'll give you a choice of a couple. You'll have to pick 3 different types of landforms and then tell me some basic information about them and then talk about where some of those formations are located specifically. So I'll talk more about that in a separate video, but let's get started on landforms. All right, so what is a landform? So a landform is just a feature on Earth's surface that's part of the terrain. And these can form in 2 main ways. So they can form when tectonic plates push together, and when this happens, we get our mountains, we get our hills, similar to the mountain above. Let me move my head because I'm going to be in the middle. I'm going to be in the way of the second image pretty soon. And the second main way that a landform can form is just via erosion from water and wind that wear down land over time, and they create valleys and canyons. So we talked a little bit about this in our discussion in class when we talked about constructive and destructive forces. So those are the 2 forces that are at play when these landforms are created. All right, let's talk about some common landforms that we might see in our world. So some common types of landforms that you may see are mountains. So mountains are higher than surrounding areas, and they're formed by movements of tectonic plates. So like we talked about in class, tectonic plates will push together, and then they'll create these ridges where they push together, which then become mountains. So mountains are higher than the surrounding areas. Hills are also higher than the surrounding areas, but they're much smaller than mountains, and they typically have a rounded peak, not quite the jagged peaks you'll see on tall mountains. And many hills were at one point mountains, but over time, over millions and millions of years, they were eroded away. And here's a nice little example of some rolling hills. And finally, we have valleys. So valleys are low-lying areas that are between hills and mountains, and these form by rivers and glaciers that carve out the landscape, and these form over thousands of years. Continuing on with some other commonly seen types of landforms, we have plateaus. Plateaus are flat highlands that are separated from other tall structures. These were caused by collisions of tectonic plates and also from upwelling of magma. So magma was forced up underground, kind of pushed up these highlands, and then it created a flat surface on top. And so like these are very similar to mountains, except like you would see in that image, there's a huge flat area on top. The Spanish call plateaus la mesas, and that is actually the word for table in Spanish, because like in the picture, these look like tables. So the name definitely fits. The next type of landform, which you might not even think this would be a type of landform, but it is, we have plains. So plains are just flat or low areas on the Earth's surface, and this was formed, these were formed via erosion by water and ice. And finally, another one that you might not expect to be a landform. Let me get my head out of the way. We have deserts. So a desert is just a place that gets little to no rain. Deserts can be hot, like the image below, that's the Sahara Desert, or deserts can be very cold, like Antarctica. And the defining factor of a desert is that it has to get less than 10 inches of precipitation per year. So very, very little precipitation. Because there's not a lot of precipitation, we don't see a lot of vegetation, and we can get a lot of erosion in deserts because there's no vegetation to kind of keep erosive forces at bay, which is why in deserts we often see lots of dunes everywhere. And finally, let's talk about some other types of landforms. Now, these landforms that we're going to discuss are less commonly seen, but they're pretty cool, so they're worth going over. So the first one is cliffs. We're all familiar with cliffs. Cliffs are vertical rock exposures, typically found on coastlines or mountainous regions. The image at the top right of the screen is a picture of the cliffs of Dover, very beautiful cliff formation in the United Kingdom. The next landform, one that we could see in the United States if we go on a road trip to Arizona. We have a butte. It's an isolated hill with steep sides and a small flat top. These are basically just skinny plateaus. They're very, very cool looking. Next, we have canyons. And my face is going to be in the way very shortly, so I'll move it up here. Canyons are deep ravines between cliffs, and these are caused by the erosive activity of rivers. So in class, we talked about the Colorado River and how that formed the Grand Canyon. Same thing with every other canyon. They're caused by erosive forces of rivers, and very similar to canyons. We're going to talk about fjords. Fjords are often seen near the ocean, and they're similar to canyons, but they were carved by glaciers. And you can see fjords, not really in this area, but if you went to Alaska, you'd be able to see some fjords. And if you went to some countries in Scandinavia, you can see some beautiful fjords. And there are many other landforms we could talk. This video could be 20 minutes long, but I'm going to cut it there. So when you complete this video, you need to move on to the little mini project I've made for you guys. There'll be another short video explaining, kind of walking you through what to do with that project. So after you finish this, go there and check out what you need to do for the project. All right, guys. See you later.